2 hours ago, a senior U.S. senator made a statement that sent shockwaves through defense circles worldwide. Not a vague warning, not diplomatic posturing, a specific timeline. Senator Tom Cotton stated that potential operations against Iran would last weeks, not days. That singular phrase reveals something Washington has been quietly planning for months, but never publicly acknowledged until now: the scale of what's being considered. This wasn't an offhand comment. Cotton sits on the Senate Armed Services Committee. He receives classified briefings. When he speaks about military timelines with that level of specificity, it signals that operational planning has moved far beyond theoretical exercises. The Pentagon doesn't measure operations in weeks unless the objectives are comprehensive, the targets are numerous, and the expected resistance is significant. 3 elements define what weeks, not days, actually means in operational terms. First, extended air campaigns targeting hardened nuclear facilities, ballistic missile sites, naval assets, and command infrastructure across a country twice the size of Texas. Iran's nuclear program is distributed across multiple underground facilities designed to survive initial strikes. Second, maritime operations to secure the Strait of Hormuz while neutralizing Iran's asymmetric naval capabilities. Third, ongoing suppression of Iranian proxy networks across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen to prevent retaliatory strikes. None of these objectives can be accomplished in 72 hours. Cotton's timeline acknowledges the operational reality that military planners have been modeling for years. Within 90 minutes of Cotton's statement becoming public, Iranian officials responded through state media. The Supreme National Security Council issued a pointed statement. Any aggressor will face consequences across multiple theaters simultaneously. The era of cost-free American military adventurism in the Middle East ended long ago. That phrase, multiple theaters simultaneously, is the key. Iran's deterrence strategy relies on imposing costs across a geographic expanse from the Mediterranean to the Arabian Sea. Iranian-backed militias in Iraq could strike 2,500 U.S. troops stationed there. Hezbollah in Lebanon possesses an estimated 150,000 rockets capable of overwhelming Israeli air defenses. Houthi forces in Yemen have demonstrated the ability to strike Saudi oil infrastructure. Iranian naval forces could deploy mines across the Strait of Hormuz, through which 21% of global petroleum passes daily. Cotton's weeks timeline accounts for these retaliatory capabilities. It suggests American planners expect to manage multiple simultaneous crises across the region, not just conduct airstrikes inside Iran. Here is what makes this moment genuinely dangerous. The United States has overwhelming conventional military superiority, but Iran has spent 2 decades building a strategic defense architecture specifically designed to make that superiority costly to employ. Both sides have capabilities. Neither side has a clear exit strategy. A former CENTCOM operations director told defense media anonymously, "We can destroy every target on the list." The question is, what happens on day 8 when oil is at $180 a barrel? Hezbollah has fired 5,000 rockets into Tel Aviv, and Iranian proxies are hitting U.S. bases across Iraq. How does this end? That question has no satisfactory answer, which is precisely why previous administrations avoided this scenario despite years of escalating tensions. Oil markets reacted within the hour. Brent crude futures jumped 7% as traders priced in potential supply disruptions. Energy analysts project that sustained conflict closing the Strait of Hormuz even partially would send prices above $150 per barrel within days. American consumers would see gas prices exceeding $6 per gallon nationally. Defense contractors saw stock prices surge. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman all posted significant gains. Pentagon stockpiles of precision-guided weapons were depleted, supporting Ukraine. Sustained operations against Iran would require emergency procurement running into hundreds of billions of dollars. But the economic calculations extend beyond oil and defense stocks. Iran has cultivated significant relationships with China and Russia over the past decade. Beijing purchases substantial Iranian oil through sanctions-evading mechanisms. Moscow has deepened military cooperation with Tehran. Neither would intervene militarily, but both could provide Iran with diplomatic cover and intelligence support that complicate American objectives. China's foreign ministry responded firmly. All parties should exercise restraint. Military solutions to complex diplomatic issues serve no one's interests. Translation: Beijing will continue purchasing Iranian oil regardless of American military action. Regional allies present their own complications. Israel has advocated for strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities for years, but Israeli officials privately acknowledge that Iranian retaliation could be devastating. Saudi Arabia has spent years trying to negotiate détente with Iran. Abu Dhabi has moved toward diplomatic engagement with Tehran. None of these allies want to be pulled into a wider regional war. Cotton's timeline suggests American planners are preparing for sustained operations with uncertain Allied support, a fundamentally different calculation than previous Middle East interventions. European reaction was swift and negative. The EU's foreign policy chief urged diplomatic solutions. France and Germany expressed concern about regional stability. European economies cannot absorb another energy crisis. NATO unity, already tested by Ukraine, could fracture over American military action that European capitals view as unnecessary. So where does this scenario lead? 3 pathways emerge. First, the United States conducts sustained airstrikes, degrading but not eliminating Iranian nuclear capabilities while managing retaliatory attacks across the region. Oil prices spike. American forces take casualties. The conflict eventually de-escalates through exhaustion, leaving Iran's nuclear program delayed but intact and regional tensions higher than before. Second, operations expand beyond initial plans as Iran's retaliation proves more effective than modeled. Israel enters the conflict after Hezbollah attacks. Saudi oil infrastructure gets hit. The Strait of Hormuz closes partially. Global economic disruption forces a negotiated settlement that achieves none of the original American objectives. Third, miscalculation on either side leads to escalation spirals that create a region-wide conflict taking years to resolve. Cotton's statement reveals that American planners have moved beyond optimistic assumptions. They're preparing for sustained operations in a hostile environment against an adversary with significant retaliatory capabilities and limited international support. 2 hours ago, a U.S. senator provided a timeline. That timeline exposes the gap between military capability and strategic clarity. The United States can strike Iran. What happens next remains the question no one has answered satisfactorily. Washington has the weapons. Tehran has the willingness to absorb costs and impose them. Neither side has the exit strategy. And Cotton's weeks timeline suggests American decision-makers are preparing to find out what happens when overwhelming force meets determined resistance across a region where previous interventions have consistently produced unintended consequences. The scenario is no longer theoretical. The planning is no longer classified. The timeline has been stated publicly. What remains uncertain is whether anyone in Washington has genuinely calculated what victory looks like when the operation lasts weeks. Costs multiply across multiple theaters, and original objectives become obscured by managing simultaneous crises across the most volatile region on the planet.